Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hey guys. Hey Josh. And Sharon and Charlie's Fish and Flora. How's it going, guys? I don't really have a axe to grind today, so I just figured I'd throw it open to a question and answer session. We can just shoot the shit. Hey Lumpy Dog. Hey Laura. Hey Jeremy. How's everybody doing today? Josh, we have been watching for the green jades. We only see them every now and then because there's so many hiding places in the tank, but they seem to be doing fine. They don't seem to be threatened by the prey cocks or the new fish at all. The new fish are doing fine. We fed them some Daphnia today, Daphnia, and my wife's looking into getting some microworm cultures on Aquabid because I think both of those fish prefer live food over flake food. Hey Charles, welcome to the stream, man. How's everybody's Saturday going? I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. Jeremy or Charles, if you guys want to stream, just let me know and I'll gladly get out of the way. I figured I'd get on for an hour or so. Bob may stream tonight again too. Plop and drop versus drip acclimate. Fish versus inverts, short ship versus multi-day ship, Lumpy Dog says. Hey Cole, Lumpy Dog, the reason I did plop and drop was because the fish came out of the box from Wet Spot at exactly the same temperature that was in my tank. Well, I say exactly. They were slightly warmer by maybe a degree than the water was in the tank. But the room temperature, it's been pretty cool here. Oh, Charles, I'll just run for about an hour. It's supposed to be in the 30s here tonight. Like, it could... There have been some frost warnings, so it could actually get down to freezing again. So the room temperature started worrying me in the sense that those fish were just, going to sit in a little plastic tray and be colder from the room temperature than they were from the tank water. So I just decided to do plop and drop. Hey Guppy Crib. Hey King Lee. Guppy Crib asked, Dwayne, how long should I keep a new sponge filter in a cycle tank before I can move it to start a new tank? I would say a month at the least, and that is with, a fish load in the tank, because it requires for the bioactive creatures, the bacteria on the sponge filter, to get enough population so that when you squeeze it out in the other tank, and that's what I would do. I would I would take the cycled sponge filter and I would squeeze the foam out into the tank and then set the filter up in the tank. Oh, did I make 300? Thank you. Lumpy Dog, I think it worked okay. We had a couple of the fish that started acting a little bit unhappy. One of the thread fins dropped straight to the bottom and just stayed there for like 15 or 20 minutes. But then something spooked it, either us moving or something else spooked it, and it took off. And the last count we got 14 total fish besides the pleco, and the last count we had was 13. And it's hard to count fish that little with that many plants in the tank. So it's entirely possible that all 14 of them are doing fine, and it's also possible that we lost one. We haven't seen it or spotted it. I haven't caught the pleco eating it or shrimp ganged up on it. So, the stuff that I would normally do to try to see where a dead fish was, with all those plants in the tank, it's really hard to try to get in there and do anything. So we're just hoping for the best. If I spot it, I'll do what I need to do to get it out of there. Probably take a little bamboo and stick a needle in the end of it and push it down in there and try to spear the dead fish if I can find one. You also asked on fish versus inverts. Everything that I have seen anywhere says that assassin snails eat shrimp, that any kind of fish will prey on the babies. But we tried to get rainbows that were, some fish are fairly large but have very tiny throats. They're just not able to swallow stuff that's very big. And we tried to get fish that couldn't swallow things that were very big, i.e. the size of a baby shrimp. Now they may be able to, we may have a problem raising future generations of these jade green shrimp, but we tried to do our best to get creatures and fish that weren't going to offer much of a threat to these shrimp. Time will tell whether we did a good job or not. And what was the last thing that Lumpy Dog asked? Short ship versus multi-day ship. Well, Lumpy Dog, I'm a big fan of saving money when we can. Hey, Niecy. I will normally go with 3-day shipping on the post office, UPS. That's normally the way I choose to ship. But the weather here has been pretty squirrely, and my wife was anxious to get these fish, so we went with and plus she was getting so many that we went with the quick ship.
Plus, Wet Spot wouldn't send them any other way.
Oh, she says that Wet Spot wouldn't send them any other way either. So
they only send the cheaper way, the non-express, to California and Oregon and Washington. So all other states you pay for overnight.
Yeah, welcome, Kevin. And putting shrimp in a community tank, the adult size shrimp are probably okay if they have lots of hiding places. But the honest truth is that the when the shrimp molt, they're especially susceptible to harm because their shell hasn't hardened yet right after they molt. So they need a good place to hide to survive after they've molted, and to have babies, lots of real tight spaces that your fish can't get into. I don't know if some of you have watched Charles' last upload he put up where he's got, heavily planted will probably help. And that's what we're going for in this tank, is heavily planted. They're green shrimp, so they should blend in. They should be heavily camouflaged in this super green tank. But I noticed that Charles in his last video had a really nice pile of rocks that were, he's got angelfish in his tank and all kinds of predatory fish. But he's got a nice pile of rocks that the shrimp can escape to and drop babies in. And we've kind of gone for that as far as trying to set up a situation where the shrimp would have plenty of hidey holes to keep from being killed. Yeah, that's what I've got in my 20-gallon Lumpy Dog. I've got a giant pile of lava rock. I went and bought, the best thing I like about lava rock is it's so light and so cheap that even at a local fish store, you can get 4 or 5 pieces of lava rock and take a sledgehammer and break it into gravel pretty much and make a huge pile. Nisi says she's been having issues with her water softener. We can finally put your fish stuff to good use. Do you have a GH tester? The only issue I've got with most water softeners, Nisi, is that they use salt to switch out calcium ions for salt ions to make the water softer, and you end up with salted water. So I'd watch that.
You can't taste it because it doesn't have the chlorine atom attached to it. So you're getting lots of salt and softened water, but you can't taste it.
I don't know if you guys can hear my wife, but she added to that. Guppy Crib asked, Dwayne, are you on well water here in Southwest Ohio? Our well water is great for fish. I never add anything to the water. I let the fish adjust to my water. Does this sound okay? Guppy Crib, I would say, okay, she didn't catch it, honey, so let me finish answering this question and you can talk.
Okay.
I'm not on well water. I'm in south central Indiana, so I'm probably not that far from you. Our local water does come from wells. There's a big old ammunition plant not too far from here, and the wells that they had drilled for the Army base ammunition plant are the wells that our local water comes from. But they also have, Lumpy Dog says just sodium, not chloride, correct. So he heard you. As far as never adding anything to the water, I would at least get a test kit or a TDS pin or both or all of the above, and at least recognize what your well water is coming out of your tap like, so that you know what your hardness is You know what your pH is. I mean, it's fine to let your fish adjust to your water. And well water is good in the sense that it doesn't have chlorines and all that kind of stuff added to it, nor is it in the common circle of water that most of us are in cities where medications end up in the water and all kinds of stuff is in the water. Pollution. Most well water does not contain many of those things at all. Hey, Amphibian and Fish Channel. So, yes, it's okay to let your fish adjust to your water. The one thing that I know of that is problematic with well water is that it can oftentimes have certain organisms in it or algae in it that can be detrimental to fish, and you can usually find that out by getting your water tested. You know, take it to a local you could take it to your local water board and ask them, or you can look around and see if you can find a place that does serious water testing, not just like your local fish store. Your local fish store will test the water and give you your hardness, your pH, your nitrates, your nitrites, that kind of thing. But you can actually have water tested very well where they test everything in the water and give you a full readout of what's in it. And I would, if I was going to use straight well water, that's the first thing I would do before I started subjecting potential new fish to it. Hey, Raymond Fish Fanatic, thanks. Thanks for being new to the channel. All are welcome here. We have a mod wall, so trolls may find their welcome not so great once they start trolling, but we've been really, knock on wood, we've been really lucky on my channel to not have trolls. I don't publish the times that I'm going on, or if I do publish the times I'm going on, I try to switch it up and come on at a different time to kind of avoid all the trolls. Plus, this channel isn't as populous as many of the others are, so oftentimes there's no issue just because there's not enough people. You got to get up around 200 or 300 people in a chat to really attract the mainstream trolls. Okay, honey, you want to...
I just was going to say that many fish are sensitive to sodium in the water, and they'll clamp their fins and start turning cartwheels right away. We don't taste the sodium that is injected by water softeners because the chlorine atom has been ripped apart from the sodium atom, and the oxygen atom has been used to just make more water. But it's actually the chlorine atom that makes us taste salt, that makes it taste the way it does. So when you drink softened water or use it in your fish tank, you're using somewhat briny water, just minus the chlorine. So that's one thing to be aware of when you do use softened water. That's all.
Could you guys hear that?
I'll write it down too and send it into chat.
Okay. Yeah, Raymond Fish Fanatic. I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm not even sure I can go and look right now. Hey, every Sunday is kind of happy. Welcome to the stream. We're just basically doing an open question and answer today. I don't really have an axe to grind or anything in particular to talk about. Sometimes it's hard to sit down and try to think of an idea to cover in a live stream. My hat's off to people that can do them 2 and 3 times a week and keep coming up with new ideas to go behind. I feel like I'm copying others sometimes, so I try to come up with ideas that are outside. Yeah, Charles, water softeners are, I mean, it doesn't remove all the calcium because most of the time water softeners are used in areas that are really hard, have really hard water. So there's plenty of calcium usually left in it, but it's just one more thing to think about when you're using the water for fish tanks. And a little bit of salt will not hurt fish. It allows them to have their osmotic processes go on easier. But if you use that same water continuously and then for some reason you have to go back to regular water, then your fish are going to suffer because they're used to that. Their osmotic process has gotten used to that amount of salt in the water. Every Sunday is kind of happy, says I did what you told me to with the internal parasites and I managed to save 5. I lost $200 worth of African cichlids. I'm really sad and scared to add more in. Every Sunday, I congratulate you on taking the plunge and managing to save 5 of your fish. You should feel a huge sense of accomplishment to do that. I recognize that you lost a lot of fish, but you did not lose all of your fish. And what you have done is given yourself another tool in your arsenal to use in the future when you see this coming again. And I think that's a great thing. Yeah, Shishimi, I'm just a placeholder for Bob's show. I don't go on the same time that Bob went. He was usually around 8 o'clock. But I want to allow others or even Bob to have that spot. But basically the only reason I started streaming regularly, Jim, was to take over Bob's spot so that there was a regular live stream on Saturday at about the same time. So yeah, I'm calling it the Bob Show in deference to Bob and, you know, in the sense saying I'm doing this because of Bob. Besides, I don't think the Dwain Show would sound very good. Guppy Crib says I don't use water softener because of my fish. Bad thing is I have to replace my water heater every 8 to 10 years. My TDS is 375. I don't use a water softener. TDS is 375 at 78 degrees, nitrate at 5 ppm. Well, that's great water. It's perfect for neocaridine shrimp too, Guppy Crib, and guppies would love it. Hot water tanks do have a drain on the bottom, and you can go down and drain your hot water tank, you know, like replace most of the water in it every now and then. And what that will do is give that sediment, that calcium sediment, a chance to run out of the tank so that it doesn't build up around the element and cause the element to not heat properly. Amphibian and Fish Channel says, Dwayne, I think my gecko likes you. He keeps jumping at the screen. Well, here's a wave for the gecko. Bob's never going to come back. He left for the mountains. I think he'll come back. I mean, he did a live stream last week. I think when he gets rained out or he's bored, he'll be back. Bring back Bob. Every Sunday he asks, do you like killifish? Have you ever kept them?
We want to, but we don't know how.
My wife wants to. Killifish are so short-lived that I've always kind of stayed away from them because they're a lot of work, they're a labor of love, and they don't live that long. You got to breed them when they're in breeding condition because you're not going to have them for that long. Yes, Joel, increased Bigfoot sightings in the Bob area. Nick, I can't really scroll away from my stream here, so I'll check your channel later. Well, but Charles, Saturdays are when Bob can go with his mom. He likes to go hiking with his mom. And it's a chance for them to bond together, and they like to both get way the heck out away from everything and commune with nature. And I think that's a wonderful thing. No problem, Nick. Yeah, that's probably true, Lumpy Dog. I think that's a two-way street between Corey and Bob. I think Bob gets the better of Corey sometimes, and Corey gets the better of Bob sometimes. And that's usually the way it is with friends. Sometimes it goes one way, and sometimes it goes others. Blue Galaris are pretty big fish. They're not exactly a small fish. Nick Richards is going for tea and crumpets.
What is a crumpet?
Have I ever kept insects of any sort? If I did keep them, it was just long enough to drop them in my fish tanks and feed them to my fish. I love to put a banana in a plastic container and set it out and let all the fruit flies in the house get in there, and then I try to trap as many of them as I can in there, and I put them in the freezer for a couple of hours and pull them out and rake them into my fish tank. My fish dearly love just dead fruit flies. They eat them like they're candy.
And mosquito larvae.
Yeah, and I feed them mosquito larvae. When I spot mosquito larvae in my dog's water dish, I drain all the water out and pick the mosquito larvae. Yeah, Jim, I think Charles is bringing up a good point. How big are the angels? At some point, the angels are going to start picking on the blue Galaris, probably. Angels are really aggressive sometimes. They're not always aggressive, but they're like discus. When they decide to be aggressive, they are really aggressive. Oh, okay. Well, maybe it's just because it's newer to the tank than the Galaris is or was. Honey every Sunday wants to know what your favorite fish is.
Okay.
You can say it and type it if you want.
I'll type it in.
Every Sunday, my favorite fish ever is a Sorbium pictus planesiceps. Sorbium ictus planesiceps. and that is what is called in the trade a firewood catfish. It is a light brown on top with black spots, a darker brown stripe, then a white stripe, and another brown stripe, and then a white belly on it. But it will go to 3 to 4 foot in the wild. So it's not a fish that most hobbyists should keep, but I have had 2 of them in the past. I had one I raised it up to about 2 foot in a 150-gallon tank, and it was too long to turn around in that 150-gallon tank without bending itself in a U, and I had to rehome it. I had another one, and I got it up to about 1 foot, and then my bad water keeping skills back in the 80s, the early 80s, killed it. I ran across a guy at the Ohio Cichlid Extravaganza when I went, who has a 1,200-gallon pond in his basement, and he has a 3-foot drift firewood catfish in his pond, and he also has a couple of tigrinus catfish. They will eat everything. They will eat full-grown pacus. They will eat stuff that you could not possibly believe would fit in their mouths. They eat everything. And he had a doorway that he could open that got him as close to the edge of the tank as possible. And he said that catfish would sit with its feelers up out of the water. They have really long feelers on the front, and that it would sit about 3 foot away from that doorway in the pond with its feelers excuse me, straight up in the water and sticking out of the water into the air, and that the big tigrinus catfish was about 3 foot behind it, doing exactly the same thing, feelers up into the air and waiting for him to throw food in. And I'm sure he fed them like raw chicken legs and stuff like that, because those are voracious catfish. So it's my favorite fish, but it's not one I'm going to keep until I get a couple of 1,000-gallon pond. Not anymore. I know better now. We all go through that phase where we got to have a red-tailed catfish. We got to have all these fish that we don't really understand get so big. Jimmy asks, has my Queen Arabesque bred? Jimmy, I got eggs from one of them at one time that I'm aware of, and they did not appear to be fertilized to me, and no male was sitting in the cave. So I did try to make an egg tumbler, and of course, as always, I left the top open on the egg tumbler, and when the air finally came on, I was having trouble getting the valve to let the air come on, and when it finally came on, it blew them straight up out of the top of my egg tumbler. So I'm getting dry already. Yeah, bye, amphibian. A new bloke? Yeah, I've got several videos out where I talk about those. If you some of the videos I've done are about old school fish keeping, and that's what we did back in the day, was to, go around the house swatting house flies and throw them in the tank with our cichlids, and fruit flies for the smaller fish. Yeah, lumpy dog. Oscars get big really fast if you feed them properly. Guppy crib. My garage has issues with water being on the floor when it rains really heavily. And what happens is that mud comes in with it. And it has been straight up raining here for 2 weeks. So I'm going to have to wait until we hit a dry patch, and that doesn't look like it's going to be for another week or so before it gets dry enough for me to get out there and take my shovel, my square edge shovel, and scrape all the mud out of the garage where I can get in there and work without worrying about slipping and breaking my neck. Jim has his Lucipinus breeding right now, and the swordtails are eating the eggs as they come out. Yeah, I guess you don't have to feed this tank today. I mean, Jimmy, you bring up a good point indirectly here. My L260s, I was concerned about them getting enough food in a tank full of tetras. But I also understood that as my tetras bred and scattered eggs, that my L260s would be eating tetra eggs. And that's a really good source of nutrition for them. And so I have not, I think I've had 2 lemon tetra fry actually grow up in the tank. So there's 2 of those lemon tetras that are new that I actually bred myself. I documented when I found them. And yeah, so basically what I'm saying is that I'm not really interested in breeding them. I would like enough to survive to actually make it possible for me to keep the colonies going, because I really like the tetras and pencil fish that I've got. Yeah, and I have covered it, Jim. If you've watched my older videos, I've talked about it. There are a lot of ways to naturally feed fish, and one of them for off-witch grazers, which L260s are. I mean, they're omnivores, but they also graze, and you can let algae go instead of seeing it as an enemy in your tank. I've always firmly believed that, yes, I want to look in the tank and check out my fish, so I do take it off the front glass, but I would be perfectly happy for the other 3 sides of my tank to be completely covered in algae, because to me it creates a place for babies to feed on infusora. Yeah, and Charles, you're right. It makes the fish interact with their environment. It gives them, Corey keeps talking about using a laser pointer to interact with your fish to make them, have fun, or to make them interact with their environment more and feel like they're, something's going on. Well, egg scatterers and live bearers producing live fry will make your fish interact with their environment much more than a laser pointer will, Enjoy your dinner, Lumpy Dog. Thanks for stopping by, man. Yep, I'm sure they would, Jim. I'm sure those Delta Killies would love guppy fry. Well, my wife brings up the point that newborn fry are for food, but there are pretty much two schools now that have kind of divided on how to cycle a tank. Back in the day, the only way there was to really cycle a tank, we didn't understand back then, or I didn't understand, and most of the people that I read, followed, and knew didn't understand that you could literally take a filter from one tank and stick it on another tank and jump start the cycling. You know, maybe it was out there, but I never saw it, or I never recognized it when I saw it. So back in the day, about the only way we really had to cycle a tank was to set it up, dechlorinate it, let it run for a couple of weeks, and then drop live fish in it. And back in the day, we used feeder goldfish because feeder goldfish were cheap, and back in the day, they weren't treated as miserably as they are now, where they're bred by the hundreds of thousands and kept in a 10-gallon tank and not fed anything. Back in the day, feeder goldfish were decent little fish. You didn't expect to get diseases and pathogens and all that stuff from feeder goldfish way back when. So we'd go buy a couple of small feeder goldfish and drop them in the tank, and sometimes the cycle would be so hard that it would kill both of them. Sometimes it wouldn't kill either one of them, because goldfish are pretty, comet goldfish are pretty hardy. And I have had many a tank where the two goldfish that I put in the tank to cycle the tank actually lived their entire lives in that tank. And I'm talking with Jack Dempsey's, large Jack Dempsey's in the tank. It's incredible sometimes how a fish will survive. And by being in the tank longer than any other fish, sometimes even predators will respect that fish for having been there when they got there and not recognize it as a food source. They'll recognize it as that fish has been here longer than I have, and I respect it. So basically two schools have broken down over the whether to use live fish to cycle a tank or whether not to use live fish to cycle a tank. And I see both sides. And when I set this 110-gallon tank up, I had absolutely no filter medium to use to jump start the cycle on this tank. I filled the tank up. It held water. I was so enthused that I drained about half of it and put my substrata, my sand and my gravels in my under gravel filter. I started adding rock work, and I built my rock work up. Hey, Kyle. Yeah, Kyle, you keep your eyes on the road, man.
Is he driving?
Yeah, he's driving and listening, hopefully. I don't want to see you posting in here, Kyle. Somebody mute Kyle for a while so he can't type while he's driving. Anyway, I set the tank up. I added some of the beneficial bacteria from a bottle, and I got a little tiny fog out of the tank. So I knew that wasn't a full cycle. So I started adding fish food. I started feeding my empty tank to create some ammonia to try to get more bacteria growing. And after about a week, I got another fog. Not a cloudy, what I recognize as a tank cycling. And so I said, okay, I'm wanting to put $60 a piece fish in this tank, and I'm not going to take a chance on those $60 a fish dying if I put them in this tank and I get a full cycle suddenly, because it'll kill your fish most of the time. So I went and bought 2 lemon tetras. I knew that I was going to keep lemon tetras in the tank. That's one of the fish I had decided on as a dither fish. And I knew that I was going to keep them. So I went and bought 2 lemon tetras from PetSmart and dropped them in the tank. One died the first day. They both got pH burned. I didn't realize that there was going to be such a difference between the pH of my tank and the water from PetSmart. But the person that sold them to me bagged them up and put about a quarter cup of water in the bag with those fish. So it wouldn't have mattered whether I tried to drip acclimate them or not. There would have been no difference in what happened to them. So I dumped them through a net and dropped them in the tank. And one died really quickly. The other one got a pH burn on him, a fairly severe pH burn. And he is still in my tank. And this is 7 months, 8 months later, 9 months. And all the fish that are in that tank recognize that little bright red lemon tetra as the owner of that tank. They all run from him if he goes after him. Even the teleocyclas are still running from him. And he's fine. He's alive and fine. So cycling a tank with live fish isn't always a death sentence. Sometimes the fish can survive. Sometimes they survive with no issues. Okay, I'm done with my rant about the different schools of thought on live fish cycling a tank and cycling a tank the ammonia method. Both work. I would not come down on either side particularly. I'm just explaining to you why I do what I do, because I'm old school. That's the way we did it back in the day. Every Sunday ask what are my thoughts on rosy barbs. I've kept rosy barbs. Guppy Crib, if you just go back and watch any of my videos that have my 110-gallon tank, or even the video I did called Tetralogy, that fish stands out. You can tell he's colored differently than anything else in the tank, and you'll see. He's red. He's red when he should be gold flecked. Every Sunday's asking me about my thoughts on rosy barbs. I have kept rosy barbs in the past, but I usually had a lot of large cichlids in my tanks. Even my community tanks had grow-out cichlids in them, and sooner or later those rosy barbs became food. I'm not a big fan of tiger barbs because they're little buttholes sometimes. They will terrorize other fish if you have a nice school of tiger barbs in a tank. I have found them to be really mean-spirited at times. They can just go out of their way to terrorize something. I had a school of like 20 of them in a 110-gallon tank with big clown loaches. I'm talking, 14-inch clown loaches that I had grown out myself. And those tiger barbs actually terrorize those clown loaches, so I ended up getting rid of mine. So I like barbs. I think they're beautiful. I think they fit well with other members of their biotope, but in the case of large Central or South American cichlids, they end up as food, and they can be really nippy. Rosy barbs are not as nippy as tiger barbs are, but they can be really nippy. Yeah, Raymond fish, they're beautiful fish. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing the fish, but in a community setting, you got to keep your eye on them because they will terrorize other fish. And anytime anybody gives you a anecdotal statement about fish, like talking about how aggressive blue galaris are, or me talking about how aggressive angelfish can be, or discus can be, or tiger barbs can be, you've got to understand that there is always going to be an exception to the rule. You might get 10 tiger barbs fully grown that don't bother anything. Yeah. Cole Schramm brings up the point our true parrot cichlid won't mess with our tiger barbs. He's a 10-inch angry cichlid too. Tiger barbs are mean little shits. They really are. I found them to be several words that I wouldn't say on a live stream. Oh. I mean, I've kept them. I think we all go through phases where we keep those kinds of fish. And if I was doing a biotope of the area where those fish come from, I would happily keep them. I've never kept giant danios every Sunday. I've kept lots of danios in the past. My skill keeping at the time when I kept them was not that good, and I did not keep them very long. I also had one of these the Werneri, the thread fins. Way back in the day, as soon as we put these in the tank, I recognized one that I had kept them before. But my skill at the time was so low, my skill level, I didn't keep them alive for very long. Danios can be kind of particular about their water quality. And at the time, I just, if you're working hard for a living, and I've worked construction type jobs most of my life, sometimes you come home, hey Valley Fish, welcome to the stream. Sometimes you come home and you just don't have it in you to get up and do a bunch of water changes. And so your tanks can suffer, the water quality drops. So sometimes it's our situations and our willingness to do water changes that harm our fish. I know Bob loves those bleeding heart tetras and that type of tetra. I've never really cared for them too much. I really haven't. I always saw them as a dither fish for my large cichlids. They do get large enough that a lot of cichlids, won't eat them, but I just never really cared for them too much. That coloration combination just never really struck me too much. I like kind of strange colored tetras, like these lemon tetras and those reed tetras that I've got. That's the kind of tetras that I like, is the darker, silvery, that kind of coloration. I don't know, maybe it looks more like what I think a tetra ought to look like. I've never been a huge fan of Congo tetras. Okay, JW Aquarium, I will make sure that I am off. You may come in conflict with Charles's live stream because I think he was going to go at 7:30ish himself. So you might keep your eye open and see if you guys are in conflict or not. Hey Priscilla, welcome to the stream. Priscilla, have you gotten any feedback on all my publishing of your web page and stuff, and my thanking you for the excellent logo that you made for me? I'm loving that logo more and more and more as time goes on. And if you guys don't know, Priscilla is the one that made the drawing of my anthropomorphized L260 Pleco that is my logo now. Hey Dan Wooch, welcome to the stream. I'm probably going to run for another 10 minutes or so. Well, Priscilla, I'm happy. I hope you get lots of inquiries about making logos for people out of it. I really do. I think you did an excellent job. And I'm glad that other people enjoy it too. That's all right, JW. You don't have to retract that. But I personally hope to not step on other people's toes. I think this Saturday evening slot that Bob pretty much held it should be open for others to fill. You know, we need to let the rest of our fish fam step up and hold. That's fine, JW. I'm glad to give you the heads up, man. Charles was in here. I don't know if he's in here now or not. He might be getting ready to do his stream. He's probably getting his 37 water jugs ready to do his live stream. We all do hide the jug on Charles because he's always drinking and getting up and going to the bathroom. I finally figured out that I just want to run mine short enough where it's not really an issue for me. But I find I do need something to drink when I'm doing these streams because your throat gets dry running on at the mouth for an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours. I'm glad, Priscilla. I'm glad you enjoyed making it. I know I kind of threw you a curveball with a mouthful of teeth, but I always think that's good. Charles, I was talking about JW Aquarium. He was going to go live at 7:30, and I told him that you were planning to go live at 7:30 Eastern as well. So I think he wants to get with you and work out time. Maybe he can go after you or before you or something. I'm going to quit here in just a little bit, so maybe JW can go first and then you could go after or something like that. And I mean, I know that it's not netiquette for us to make way for each other and give the others, the floor when streams are going on. Lots of people just run all over top of each other, but I think we should try to at least, talk to each other and say, hey, I'm wanting to be in that time slot. Could you go a little later or a little earlier or something? And I would be more than willing to do that if people approach me and say, look, I'm getting ready to go live and I've been set up for this for a while. Can you get out of my way? I'll be happy to. Yeah, JW. Charles, you usually go for 2 hours, don't you, or an hour and a half or something? Maybe you guys can piggyback off of each other or something. every Sunday I can show you exactly how many fish tanks I have. Thanks to the miracles of modern science, we can, excuse my messy house, I'm sure you'll see more of it than you want. You can see Lizzie, my cat. There's my Lizzie. I have this 110-gallon tank with all of my lemon tetras, and there is the tetra that we were speaking about with his pH burn. I'm sure you can see that he's doing quite well. He is a little stunted for his age, but other than that, he does fine. My teleocyclas are doing fine. If you can see through the algae I need to clean off. There's an L260 tail. That's about the most you get to see out of these guys. My pencil fish. So I have one 110-gallon tank. There's my blow across the top of the tank water supply coming in, the input coming in from my my Fluval 404. This is the planted end of my tank. There are 3 or 4 L260s that live in this side. You can just see one down in there if the camera will pick him up. I also have heavy Eco Complete on the bottom, about 3 or 4 inches, and then 2 inches of gravel that from Lizzie. So I've got that 110. I have got this shrimp tank. I'm not sure how well this camera is going to pick up my shrimp, but you can see, if it will, that there's babies all over the front of the tank. There's some that are the size of little teeny splinters, and the tank's kind of hard to look into because the diatom algae and the algae itself grow on the front side of this tank because of this light, putting out more light than the little light on this tank has. So I've got a 20-gallon shrimp tank, shrimp only, besides assassin snails. This 110-gallon tank. There's my shelf full of medications and foods. And if I can get this thing to stretch out properly, we can go through the rest of the house. Careful about backing up with your chair, honey. And we can just see the side of my wife's 75-gallon tank. You can see the heater. You can see some of the Pracox rainbows in this corner. And I'm not sure if you can look far enough through and see the Werner eye and the Gertrudii in the tank. The little sucker on the side of the tank is the Marineland red LED, which you can see back over there. This is my homemade LED light system that I've put together for my wife. You can see that it lights up the tank really well. I can't quite get this thing to stretch far enough to get around to the front of the tank, but at least you can see it. Now to get this thing back in place. And there's a tour of my 3 fish tanks. And one of them is actually my wife's fish tank. I'm sorry, Priscilla. I didn't mean to get you dizzy. I'm not very good at this wrangling wires through my house right now. So there are 3 fish tanks in this house, a 20-gallon, a 110, and a 75 in the dining room.
See what Kyle's saying about losing his goldfish?
Kyle, I haven't been paying attention to chat. You're losing goldfish, my wife said. Sorry to hear about that. Is this more of your water issues that you've been experiencing, Kyle? I hope you're back home if you're typing in chat. The last thing in this world that I want to do is be the cause of someone dying because they're typing on their phone while they're driving. Priscilla says they're going to do an all-girl live stream.
Oh, yeah.
If I could figure out how to get Google Hangout to work with XSplit, I'd let my wife join you. At some point, I'm probably going to run out of my free subscription of XSplit, and at that time I'll either have to go to OBS, which I should be able to make Google Hangout function in that, or I'll have to pay money monthly to get my XSplit. I've really enjoyed XSplit because it's so easy. Even an idiot like me has been able to function with it, although I'm not exactly computer illiterate, so I don't know if I can qualify myself as that exactly. I've been building my own computer since the 80s. But I hope, Kyle, that you get your fish death issues solved. Yes, I'm using XSplit now, Priscilla, and I've had really good luck with it. But I cannot get it to do Google Hangout at all. There's a lot of browsers and programs that have a lot of trouble with Google Hangout. I'm not sure what the issues is or how the coding works, but I know that there are several browsers that have just completely done away with doing any attempt. I'm on Windows 10, Priscilla. I hated to do it, but I came to a point in the road where my computer had literally locked up on me. I can't remember right now why, but it was going to be so much more difficult to do a wipe and start over, and I was going to lose a lot of information. So I just went ahead and upgraded to 10, and yeah, I use Firefox, and that may be one of my issues. Every Sunday is kind of happy, wants to know who I watch. I try to watch almost all of the people that have subscribed to me. I try to help them out. I watch Joey, King of DIY. I watch Peck Tech sometimes. I watch Mark Shrimp Tanks. I watch Rob, Luke Diesel. I watch Jimmy. I watch Corey. I watch Bob.
You better mention some women.
I better mention some women, my wife says. Occasionally I watch Rachel O'Leary. Women.
You watch the Beta lady.
Yeah, I watch Jan. I watch way more than I should. I try to keep up with YouTube because I'm still learning. Am I going to visit Joey's aquarium gallery? I'm going to virtually visit it, I'm sure. But yeah, I watch Ted Judy. I watch Guapote Mel. I watch a lot of old schoolers. Um, no, I'm not a big fan of Solid Gold Aquatics or Dean Taylor or whatever her name is. Those kind of stray from the field of fish keeping for me. I mean, they do it and they do it well. I'm not arguing that they don't. Susan from Alabama. I watch a lot of older school. Heiko Blair has a channel, and he very rarely puts out content, but I am subscribed to him so that when his content comes out, I'm well up over several hundred subs, so I'm subbed around a lot, and when I'm notified, I try to watch those people's content. Okay, guys, there are other people that are wanting to stream, so I'm gonna call a close to this. I appreciate the heck out of all of you showing up. I hope maybe we've given out some good information, or at least given you ways to hopefully improve your skills as a hobbyist. And I will talk to you next time. Every Sunday? Of course you should. Okay, Charles is probably coming up now. Bye all. Thanks for coming.